In this Battletech post, I want to talk about combined arms, total warfare. Following up on some of the comments, following up on the acquisition phase of new units, a couple of points to keep in mind. Now, the great thing about Battletech that I enjoy when compared to other wargaming systems out there is that the rules are complete where you can play as simple as you want or as complex as you want. Compare that to something like Warhammer 40,000, which I'm also a massive enthusiast of. Here's all of your units in there. You can kind of pull from this, and for new players in the game or people that want to tweak things in a specific way, it's impossible or it makes it very challenging. What do you mean I can't bring my Lord of War? What do you mean I can't bring my Titan to the table? It's in the rules. I can do it. Well, Battletech, it's also in the rules, but you can implement these in strategies. For the longest time, I played mech versus mech. I knew about tanks. I knew about infantry. I knew about air support. You know, they were happening somewhere else, but we were real mech heads, and we liked to go head-to-head, toe-to-toe with the mechs. Over time, Total Warfare, introducing new units and playing things, it's very unique in Battletech because, and I want to encourage you to explore this idea of Total Warfare and incorporating other units. Because the narrative is so big. Yes, the mechs are the elite, the knights of the night, but infantry is there, vehicles are there, air support is there. When one side or technology history has these potent weapons, that doesn't mean other weapons don't exist. Battletech is very interesting with that. Personally, I also really enjoy the narrative of infantry. Just men. I mean, you know, my favorite line right there was, "You're not brave. Men are brave." That's what it is. It's one thing to be in a mech, you know, pilot, mech warrior out there with a walking tank. It's another thing to be infantry just with some body armor and a tag laser or a single SRM shot, and you got to take down that machine. And on the table, when my infantry take down mechs, I can see them like posing heroically for picked caps and snapshots and everything on there, you know, of this accomplishment. Welcome to the ranks of the dispossessed. So where do we start? I'm going to offer some suggestions because certainly these things tend to get a little bit out of hand and collections grow. That's part of the nature of wargaming. That's part of the nature of Battletech. But I want to give you some units that, regardless of what your play style is, if you look at a lot of my collections, I got a lot of autocannons everywhere. I got a lot of LRM packs. I got a lot of AC-20s. 50% or more of my forces are carrying AC-20s or lugging around AC-20s on there. I like big guns. It's my player personality. So certainly you're going to have a player personality, but there are certain units in Battletech that just excel at a variety of roles, and they're fun to use. I want to say in other gaming systems they would be called auto-includes. Up there on my archive, on my YouTube channel, and on my blog, we talk about some of these auto-includes. A great example of that would be the catapult. Just on all levels, it's got mobility, it's got decent armor, it's got redundancy, meaning, you know, two or multiples of every weapon, because one is none, two is one, three is some on there. You've got the lasers, you've got the missiles. It's solid. If it's like, look, I don't know what mission I'm going up against, and I don't know what I'm going to face, what Fritz is going to bring to the table, even though it's probably going to be multiple AC-20s, I'm going to bring a catapult. And you can't go wrong with that. So we're going to look at that combined arms total warfare. 4 stands of infantry. 4 stands of infantry. Infantry are auto-include in every single game. High battle value, low battle value on there. You can use them to burn initiative. You can use them for spotting in urban warfare, or if they can get into cover. They are really, really hard to dislodge unless you've got machine guns or flamers on there. I mean, there's always a foil, there's always a counter, but often with that type of mech, unless it's a dedicated infantry hunter, there might be better targets on there. You could gear them up for long range. You can gear them up for short range on there. You can give them field pieces, give them an AC-5, an AC-10, you know, some infantry in a building hidden in cover with an AC-10 or an AC-5. That's got some bite. When you look at the battle value, you're like, that's insane on there. So you want to get 4 stands of infantry. From there, branching out, you need a delivery system. On foot, moving 1 hex a turn, unless it's a situation where you're the defender, that's not going to work. When you go into mechanized infantry, now they have less numbers. You want the full numbers on there. It brings the battle value up. Often you can get additional use out of a delivery system. The 2 that I recommend, Karnov and Goblins. So the Karnov is like this giant dual rotary blade VTOL on there. It can carry infantry. It can go up high. After it drops the infantry off, it can now do loops and act as a spotter on there. For the variety in the lulls, you could play the variant with the AC-20 on there. You know I was going to bring that AC-20. You can hot drop infantry over onto mechs. You can take infantry because it moves very, very fast. You can turn 1, be in the center of the table, drop that infantry in, and now you've got a pocket of infantry dug in, especially if there's some terrain, to push out that threat bubble, to force your opponent to move through that on there. And the battle value is nothing. Second to that, a little bit more of a battle value investment, Goblins. These are kind of like a cross between an APC, Armored Personnel Carrier, and a tank. And you guys know I love tanks on there. With the Goblins, you carry less infantry in the cargo bay, but now you've got some additional weapons. You've got access to machine guns. You've got access to lasers. You have access to a turret, depending on the variants. The idea is these vehicles can move forward, infantry fighting vehicles, drop off the infantry get into cover, and now the vehicles can engage. And certainly the Goblins are no match for an assault mech or a heavy mech, but they can put the hurt on those light mechs. They can throw some additional firepower into the mix on there. And again, battle value is relatively low on there. If you're not fully playing WYSIWYG, the Goblin is pretty interchangeable with the Bulldog, visually in how they look and how they play. So you could take your infantry, spend the points, the battle value to make them jump, and then proxy in those Goblins as Bulldogs. So those are units that you are going to use no matter what. Now we jump into some tanks on there. And the 2 places you want to go starting out are hover units and the medium end tanks. There are some very, very heavy, potent tanks out there. The Antaros and things like that where you're like, wait, is that a typo? It's got like 20 medium lasers on there and like 220 packs. Like, what the heck? Just crazy. But the challenge here, of course, is battle value is high. Not as high as a mech, but high for a vehicle. It's very, very slow. So tactically, you have to be 100%. And it's so slow, you're subject to motive hits. Without interlocking support or very specific examples, it's just going to become a turret. It's going to get hit. I'm not saying you won't move into heavy tanks on there. But again, we're talking about starting out, just acquisition to your collection, acquisition to acclimating to combined arms and total warfare. We want to get some light to medium hover tanks. Usually what you're going to see on them is a medium laser. You're going to see some of the variants with short-range missile 6-packs. You're going to use them for spotting. You're going to use them for outflanking. You're going to use them for rear armor attacks. They're very, very fast. They're very, very cheap. They don't have a lot of armor. I mean, it's like a giant balloon with some ceramite armor or something like that on there, but very, very effective for what they do. With regard to the light tanks, you want to look at some that have bigger guns. Well, I should say medium tanks that are on there. You can look at very, very light tanks like the Scorpion to harass. You can look at stuff like the Demolisher, which is a heavy tank. You can also look at stuff like the Patton and Rommel, which while they are heavier tanks, they have a variety of configurations, a variety of weapons. One of them has an AC-20 and good armor on a turret. They are very, very forgiving, I should say, with motive hits, and tactically, if you're learning, you're always going to have a use for those. Now we move into the last piece, air support on there. And I'm going to leave artillery and naval units. We're going to touch briefly on that, but we're going to kind of put those off to the side. This is where Warriors are very, very light, fast attack helicopters. They have an autocannon. They have machine guns. They have lower SRM packs, 2 and 4, depending on the variant. They move extremely fast. These are vehicles that can be on the other side of the table in one turn. You can get side shots on vehicles. You can use them against infantry. You can use them to swat down Karnovs. You can use them to just fly over and then fly under and get rear armor. I mean, they don't do tons of damage, but for harassment and disruption units, for the battle value, I consider 2 in every game on there. Absolutely amazing. Now if we move into air support or aerospace on there, I would start with the others first, because now you're laying on an additional phase and an additional rule with that. And you need an answer. Air power does really dominate Battletech if your opponent does not have a dedicated answer to it, meaning their own air support or something like the Partisan dedicated anti-aircraft or the Jaeger mech, something that can swat these things down. You're going to spend most of your turns shooting everything at air support, and you will take it down eventually. But the time spent burning and the turns, the rest of your opponent's forces are going to be all over you. Also, with some of the Aerotech fighters, they're up there in battle value or more expensive in battle value than some mechs. They have more armor than mechs, some of these. I mean, they're like mechs in the air on there. So that's a little bit out of the scope. You'll move into that. But much of those choices there, in my opinion, depends on player personality. Artillery and naval stuff and weird stuff in Battletech that's on there. Support vehicles like the command truck, coolant truck, all that type of stuff. You move into that. Certainly artillery is interesting to play with. Certainly artillery adds a new dimension to the game, but against a fast-moving Battletech lance or two forces that aren't dug in, the effectiveness of artillery is pretty minimal due to the time in transit, due to picking the point on the table where it's going to land, calling it in, and stuff like that. That's not to say it doesn't have its place, but that would be the last thing that I would layer on. So there's your attack plan. And I would... Certainly, I don't like to dictate, and I wouldn't want to dictate how you navigate and play around in the Battletech sandbox. But with the starter set out, with a lot of great mechs out there, with an amazing game, this is a great chance to jump into the combined arms and to jump into that total warfare spirit.